Nau mai, haere mai, welcome. I'm Bruce Munro, and with me is International Relations Specialist, Professor Robert Patman, and this is Global Insight. New Zealand waits to see what shape its new government will take. A key role in any government is Minister of Foreign Affairs. Who will take that position and what will it mean? Welcome, Robert.
Morena, Bruce.
Well, let's go right for the chase. Winston Peters has twice been Minister of Foreign Affairs. Do you think he wants the job this time?
I think he may do. He's reportedly wants it. And he certainly has some background. He was Foreign Minister under Helen Clark's Labour-led government in 2005, 2008. And of course, he was Foreign Minister under Jacinda Ardern's led coalition with New Zealand First between 2017 and 2020. So he's certainly got experience. He was regarded as a relatively safe pair of hands. And I think it's important whoever gets the job does have some experience in this area, because they've got to hit the ground running. The world really is in a very tumultuous state at the moment, and New Zealand will be expected to express views and stances on some key international issues rather quickly.
You said you felt that there was that opinion that he was a relatively safe pair of hands. Do you think he would be the right Minister of Foreign Affairs for New Zealand in 2023?
Well, that's a judgment only that the leader of the National Party, Chris Luxon, can make. As I've just made the case for Mr. Peters having the job, his experience and the fact that he was relatively successful before. But one or two question marks have been raised about his judgment recently. He was tweeted about Jacinda Ardern knowing, I think, 9 minutes ahead of the Christchurch terror attack. Many people found that to be, how should I put it, ill-judged to make such claims, as if she was responsible for the attack. That's the implication. And that raised some eyebrows, not only domestically but internationally. So, that will have to be weighed by Mr. Luxon. And the other thing we have to take into account here, Bruce, is that Mr. Luxon will look at this appointment in terms of the coalition management. He will probably want someone who's on the same wavelengths as himself. He may feel that it's such an important job that National, as the biggest party, must have that portfolio. We just don't know this. I do think the job, if anything, has grown in importance in the last decade for New Zealand, and that, in a sense, is a byproduct of how successful Jacinda Ardern was as a Prime Minister in sort of making New Zealand, if you like, in boosting the international reputation of New Zealand. And so, yeah, it's a very difficult one to predict at the moment. There are other contenders, of course. It's rumoured that Judith Collins and Paul Goldsmith have some interest in the position of Foreign Minister, so we just don't know.
You don't have somebody that you would pick as the likely one to win the contest?
No, I think if I said that would probably doom them. And my crystal ball is as misty as anyone else's when it comes to predicting what will happen in politics. I do think we've mentioned one benchmark for selection, which is experience in the foreign policy area, but it's not the only one. It may well be that Mr. Luxon wants someone who is capable of quickly adapting to the position, who will bring a fresh perspective. Mr. Luxon made it very plain during the campaign that he wanted New Zealand to be proactive, both economically and diplomatically, on the world stage. And that may well influence his thoughts about who he believes should have that position.
Will New Zealand's foreign policy approach change at all under a National Act New Zealand First coalition? That
depends how much influence New Zealand First and Act have on foreign policy. I think National and Labour essentially share a bipartisan approach to foreign policy. There may be a little bit of difference of emphasis. For example, Mr. Luxon said during the campaign that he wanted to give relations with China fresh momentum, which shows that he may be slightly more pro-China. And then there was also hints that he wanted to be closer to traditional New Zealand partners. Well, those two things don't sit comfortably together, because the hint about being traditionally closer to traditional partners like Australia and the US, that may not go down particularly well with China. So I suspect there won't be too much difference in substantial terms, between Labour and National. But again, if New Zealand First claims the position of Foreign Minister, and it may not necessarily be Mr. Peters. I mean, Shane Jones is someone with quite high-level experience before, and we don't even know whether Mr. Peters actually wants the job. It's been reported he wants the job, but that doesn't mean he does.
Right. What would be the signs that ACT or New Zealand First were having some influence in the policy makeup?
I suppose the first signs would come with the announcement of the new government, who's got what, and the sort of statements and the deal that's been agreed. Right.
And how would you see ACT or New Zealand First differing from National in foreign policy approach?
I think ACT would be seeking a closer relationship with the United States. Again, you see, the reason I'm hesitating here, Bruce, is that as an old expression in politics, that we're all tigers out of office. And once you get into office, and we've seen this with other coalitions in the past, people who have been striking out very strong positions have a habit of unsaying them once they're in government. And you know, the bargaining side is not all on ACT and New Zealand First. This is an opportunity for them to play a role in government, and so they're under a lot of pressure to compromise. So I think, yeah, with regard to ACT, it may be a closer relationship with the United States. I can't see ACT, though, given their importance on free markets, wanting to do anything to compromise relations with China. With New Zealand First, it may be that I don't know, but my sense is that Mr. Peters may want to press for some sort of peaceful resolution in Ukraine, because he certainly, in the past few years, has been sympathetic to Brexiteers in Britain, and that's their position, that they believe that the war should be brought to an end as soon as possible, and in effect tacitly accept that Mr. Putin should get some land in exchange for the deal. So we could see some, and we're seeing this in the Republican Party in the US as well. But it's very difficult to say. What I would say, in fairness to Mr. Peters, is that he would put a big emphasis on deepening the relationship with the Pacific. He'd also may be more robust with China than National would like to be. That would probably be the biggest difference, I think.
Let's look at the most pressing geopolitical conflict right now. And last time you and I spoke, you said that there is no long-term military solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict, only a political one. But this conflict has been simmering for decades. Yeah. Is there anything that you can see that is different in what is happening right now that could actually lead towards a political solution?
Well, first of all, let's just acknowledge that what's unfolding is a stain on the world. It's an absolute tragedy. And it speaks volumes of the lack of international machinery for dealing with actors, and here I include both Hamas and Israel, that show scant regard for international law. It was certainly, in the words of Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, a beastly attack by Hamas on Israel, and he said they would have to respond in kind. And what we have seen in the period since he made that statement on the 9th of October fully justifies, or certainly amplifies, what he meant by that. We've seen a response that hasn't simply targeted Hamas, which has resulted in the death of many civilians. We're now looking at more than 9,000 Palestinians have died. 40% of the Palestinians who died are children. And we have had some energetic efforts to bring this to a halt. Does this create the opening for a new initiative? There is outrage around the world about what's happening. And I think both the United States and Israel are finding themselves under pressure. I think what we discussed early on has come to fruition. We discussed the possibility that the United States had misjudged the situation by giving unreserved support to Israel's right of self-defense. Just to clarify this, no one in their right mind, in my view, disputes Israel's got a right to self-defense, particularly after such an appalling terrorist attack. But the right of self-defense is not limitless, and it must conform with humanitarian law. And here we see a situation where Israel seems to be repeating the mistakes of the United States after 9/11. Instead, the United States didn't specifically target Al-Qaeda with its formula war on terror, and now we have a situation where to third parties, Israel seems to be collectively punishing the Gaza Strip rather than ruthlessly targeting Hamas and protecting civilians. Whether that outrage, jokingly, will put pressure for America to adjust its policy, but at the moment it's difficult to see how such an initiative would generate a two-state solution, which most people say they want.
Right. So difficult to see how we would get there.
Yeah.
Can I just pick up on that point? You said the US misjudged what they did after 9/11. What was the fallout from that? What fallout are they still experiencing? Or did they get away with it in the long run? Because I'm wondering, what does this mean for Israel if they're copying that mistake? What's the long-term implications for Israel?
I'm not saying they're consciously copying it, but Mr. Biden warned Mr. Netanyahu not to make the mistakes, as he put it, that America did after 9/11. And he was alluding to the fact that the feeling of vengeance took very strong hold in the United States. And so that they could have unfettered pursuit of those deemed responsible for 9/11, Al-Qaeda, they also needed access to those countries which they believed had supported Al-Qaeda, which meant rather than just specifically targeting Al-Qaeda, they came up with this formula, war on terror. And that led to an illegal invasion of Iraq, which New Zealand opposed, which led to the death of more than 900,000 people in Iraq. So all these things, I think the other big missed opportunity after 9/11, despite the Bush administration repeatedly saying it wanted a two-state solution, was there was no initiative to bring that about. And while this issue festers, it's going to be hijacked and manipulated by extremists in the Middle East. This is why I said to you before, there is no military solution to this. Even if Hamas is exterminated, as the Israeli government apparently has set the goal of achieving this, even if it succeeds in exterminating the Hamas leadership, it will still be confronted with the problem of the unrelenting Palestinian desire for a state. They are a nation in search of a state. And quite frankly, with the number of civilian deaths rising by the day, it means that even if they succeed in completely neutralising Hamas, another extremist group could well tap into the sort of hatred that's being unleashed by all this killing of children and civilians to manipulate that and again make Israel insecure. So I think your question is a really good one. We desperately need a political solution. Mr. Blinken referred to that in the last 24 hours, the need to look the next step. But America's been saying this for a long time. And so many people in the Middle East are sceptical. They see Mr. Blinken's comment about humanitarian pauses and the need for a two-state solution as simply providing diplomatic cover for Israel to continue. I'm not saying that's correct. I think Blinken may be sincere, but I'm just saying that may be the perception on the ground in the Middle East.
What then is the first thing that our new Minister of Foreign Affairs needs to do or say about the Israel-Hamas war?
I think we must very clearly indicate that we want an immediate ceasefire. The problem with a humanitarian pause is it's vague. Is it going to last for 2 hours or 3 hours or 2 days or 4 days? And for people who've been being pummeled in the Gaza Strip, you need some clarity. They need relief from this. Most of these people who have died had nothing to do with the Hamas attack. So I think New Zealand, it voted for a sustained humanitarian truce, not a humanitarian pause, a sustained humanitarian truce. That's what Mr. Luxon, who endorsed that vote, by the way, in the UN, and we need a foreign minister to make it quite clear that where New Zealand stands on this. And of course, it's not just an immediate ceasefire. We also need to couple that with a demand for the immediate release of all hostages. I believe if that was the policy of at least one, maybe several liberal democracies, that would put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages. They're coming under a lot of pressure from Palestinians because a lot of Palestinians are extremely angry that they are basically on the receiving end of all the retaliation that should be going towards Hamas. So I do think, to come back to your question, we need to specify, a foreign minister, a new foreign minister needs to make it very clear that New Zealand is demanding an immediate ceasefire and the immediate release of all hostages taken by Hamas.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you for watching. Catch us next time on Global Insight. Ka kite anō.